How different is Steve Rogers' Captain America from comics to screen?
I don't know.
Stephen Rogers, aka Captain America, has appeared in thousands of Marvel comics, so there's a significant amount of lore surrounding this character. On the big screen, we've seen the character be played by Chris Evans in a number of MCU movies. So let's find out how different the character is in the comics to his appearances in those films. Steve Rogers made his first appearance in 1940's Captain America Comics issue 1, written and illustrated by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. In the issue, the baddies from the Second World War infiltrate US forces, prompting President Roosevelt and head of FBI J. Arthur Grover to launch a counterattack. In a secret lab, a slim man named Steve Rogers is given a serum that transforms him into a super soldier with enhanced strength and intelligence, who they call Captain America. However, a Gestapo agent kills the doctor and destroys the serum, but Captain America is able to defeat him. Now unable to build an army with the serum, Steve becomes a symbol for America, donning a red, white and blue costume to hide his identity, wielding a matching triangular shield, and fighting with a sidekick, his buddy, the very Marvel named Bucky Barnes. But this first appearance comic was a mega 67-page issue featuring 7 stories, where Steve and Buck fight together during World War II to battle threats working for the German leader like Wolfgang von Kranz, Omar, and the Red Skull. But we later learn this wasn't the real Red Skull, it was George Maxson posing as the notable villain. Like a lot of comics where they give the character's origin in the first issue, they tend to be expanded upon or changed over the years, and that's no different for Steve Rogers. In Captain America issue 109, we learn that Steve wanted to enlist in the army, but was rejected because of his slim physique and being prone to illness. However, General Chester Phillips saw how much Rogers wanted to fight for his country and offered him the opportunity to be experimented on in the Super Soldier program. This comic also made it more obvious that Steve was additionally exposed to Vita rays, not just drinking the Super Soldier serum to get his powers. On the big screen, Steve Rogers' first appearance was in Captain America the First Avenger, a movie which took inspiration from these previously mentioned comics, including being a frail man during World War II, being given the Super Soldier serum, and stopping a spy that kills Dr. Erskine before destroying the remaining formula. In both the comics and movies, it was also explained that there was a decent period of time between Steve getting his powers to actually using them for battling in the war. In the books, he used this time to train in gymnastics and hand-to-hand combat for Colonel Rex Applegate and William Essard Fairbairn, while the movie had Rogers entertain and educate Americans and soldiers about the war under the title Captain America. In the final days of the war, Steve and Buck were trying to stop a drone plane carrying a bomb launched by Baron Zemo. The drone exploded where Barnes was presumed dead on impact, but Rogers fell into the Arctic Ocean, frozen until he was found years later by an Inuit tribe who worshipped him. Namor came across them, tossing the frozen block into the ocean for believing they were bowing down to something meaningless. As the block of ice travelled across the sea, it washed up next to the Avengers, thawing out to discover it was Captain America. The reason Steve was able to survive in this state for so long was because of the Super Soldier serum. The movie was similar in the sense that Rogers was frozen on ice trying to stop a bomb-filled aircraft, but the villain behind it was Red Skull instead of Zemo. Bucky had already died at this point, and S.H.I.E.L.D. were the ones who found his body after a Russian oil team spotted the crashed aircraft. Probably the main difference from comic to screen is that the movie never had Steve hide his secret identity, whereas in the books, he didn't unmask until 2002's Captain America issue 3, then says his name in the following comic.
I am Steve Rogers.
Like most great characters, Steve Rogers has a complex personality. He's selfless, patient, honest, brave, and stands up for what he believes in, those values being freedom, justice, and equality. Even if Steve is outmatched in a fight, these values still remain true, and always does his best. You might say,
I can do this all day.
Steve is extremely trustworthy, to the point where he's only one of very few to have access to Tony Stark's Iron Man armory, and is trusted by Wakanda to use their technology as a foreigner. Even Deadpool trusts him, and Wade doesn't trust anyone, and despite not many liking Deadpool, Steve is one who empathizes with him. On top of this, Rogers even knows that the very Marvel named Peter Parker is one of the Spider-Men and is respectful about keeping that a secret. The trust and being able to see the good in people is something that translates to screen. Something else that translates to screen is that the serum makes good people great and bad people worse. So even before Rogers was enhanced, he was a good person. Something Steve has always struggled to come to terms with is being a man out of time. While he's had more time in the comics to accept this, it's something that's often addressed, but the movies made it clear that he needed to return to his time. The main reason why he stayed in the present in the books is because he was initially concerned that the Captain America symbol and ideology would be outdated, but Steve has come to realize heroes are always required. As a hero, he's fought many battles, from the Second World War to Thanos' Infinity War. Steve was always front and center, inspiring people, representing what's great about society, fighting for what's right, despite still having flaws. He's often considered to be the greatest hero of all time. And because of this, he's frequently a leader, most notably for the Avengers team. What's also shown in both the comics and movies is that Steve doesn't like taking the life of anyone and will only do it if absolutely necessary to save the lives of innocent people. In both the Civil War comic and Captain America Civil War movie, Steve Rogers is against the Registration Act, refusing to represent the American government because it will give up his personal freedom and the right to choose. He believes that sometimes going against what the government has to say is the best decision for the situation. That's not the only time he's lost trust in the government. While investigating the Secret Empire, Rogers discovered its leader was a high-ranking government official. The traitor's unaliving was covered up, leading to Rogers giving up the Captain America mantle, becoming Nomad for a period of time in the books. So it's kind of ironic how Captain America was created as a symbol by the American government, but Steve doesn't want to be associated with them. You might say a better name for the character would be Captain Good. There's also a nice nod in the first Captain America movie, showing Steve's artistic side as he attended a year of art school in the comics. But we all know Steve's number one trait.
The only way to really be cool is to follow the rules.
Now, what's Steve Rogers' connection to other characters? He was born on September 28, 1922 to parents Sarah and Joseph Rogers, who were financially poor Irish immigrants. In the movies, his birth date was July 4, 1918, but his parents were still Sarah and Joseph. Not a lot is known about his childhood, but in both the comics and movies, his father died at a young age and his mother passed away from an illness in his late teens. In later comics, it was revealed that his dad became an abusive drunk to both Sarah and Steve after losing his job and struggled to find work. When he died, Steve's mum ended up working double shifts to make ends meet. Romantically, Steve's most notable on-screen relationship is with Peggy Carter, who he even ended up marrying, but that never happened in the comics, and this connection isn't as prominent on page as it was on screen. A relationship that was more prominent on page was with her niece, Sharon Carter, someone who he had a brief connection with in Captain America Civil War. While Steve has had a few brief romantic relationships over the years, this isn't really a trait that's common with Rogers, particularly in the comics. Steve does, however, have an adoptive son in the comics, Ian Rogers, who Steve raised as his own. Cap was abducted by Arnim Zola and taken to Dimension Z, where Zola experimented on him to weaponize his super soldier serum. He broke free and rescued a baby, not knowing he was Zola's son, who he'd also been experimenting on. Though he may not have had many romantic partners, Steve has had a number of team-up partners, most notably Bucky Barnes, Sam Wilson, Natasha Romanoff, and Sharon Carter, all of which have appeared on both page and screen. The main differences is that Buck is 3 years younger than Steve in the comics, being much more of a Robin to Steve's Batman, but in the MCU, Buck is a year older, with their friendship much more reflecting this quote.
We're like Batman and Robin, but we're both Batman.
The movies have also seen Barnes have the Winter Soldier persona, which provided a new relationship between he and Steve, something that's translated in quite a similar way across the mediums. His partnership with Sam is also very similar, even making him his successor to the Captain America title on page and screen, something I'll talk about more in the next video, which will be on Sam Wilson. Additional comic exclusive team-ups include Rachel Leiden's Diamondback, Jack Monroe's Nomad, Rick Jones, and the very Marvel named Dennis Dunphy's Demolition Man. As for the larger teams Steve has been a part of, the most notable is the Avengers. However, he was not a founding member in the comics, unlike the MCU. He didn't join until issue 4. He also wasn't the first person in the comics to say the iconic catchphrase, Avengers Assemble. That honor was initially said by Thor in Avengers issue 10. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Howling Commandos is another page and screen team-up that he fought alongside during the Second World War, much like Namor and Jim Hammond's Human Torch as part of the Invaders, but that was just comic exclusive. Other notable comic exclusives include the Uncanny Avengers, a team of X-Men and Avengers, plus the Illuminati, a group who withheld secrets from the rest of the world. As for members within these groups, he's been closer with some than others, including Tony Stark, had fallings out with many, including Tony Stark, but almost always manages to make up. with Tony Stark. As for notable villains, Johann Schmidt's Red Skull is the most well known, who is fought on both page and screen. While we've only seen them encounter each other in one movie, he's a character who keeps coming back in the comics, and a rivalry that continues to evolve. Other members of Hydra, Arnim Zola, Crossbones, Baron Strucker, and the Zemos have also been seen on both page and screen against Rogers. Taskmaster and Flag Smasher have both appeared in the MCU, but not against Steve. They're only significant to him in the comics. Another noteworthy comic exclusive villain is the Serpent Society, and in the comics, Steve has also been the host of 2 symbiotes, including Carnage.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
Physically speaking, Steve is known for having blonde hair, blue eyes, chiseled jawline, and abs. So basically Chris Evans. The Super Soldier Serum gives Steve the power of enhanced strength, speed, endurance, agility, reflexes, durability, stamina, healing, peak mental processing, and aging longevity. The comics have also indicated at him having heightened senses. But even without the juice, he's a skillful strategist, martial artist, and can wield most weapons with ease. Though he's less known for wielding weapons, and more commonly seen equipping a shield. First appearing in 1941's Captain America Comics issue 1, it was initially triangular, red, white and blue striped, with 3 stars and made of steel. This remained his protector all the way until the very next issue when he was equipped with the iconic circular shape. The colours were in a slightly different order, but it eventually became the iconic look we know. It was created by the very Marvel named Dr. Myron McLean, experimenting with indestructible metals for military tanks, and presented to Steve by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was made up of vibranium, steel alloy, and proto-adamantium, not only making it virtually indestructible, wind-resistant, absorbent to kinetic energy, and extremely lightweight, but it's also immune to Magneto's powers. The difference between the comics and movies is that the shield had no adamantium due to 20th Century Fox having the rights to that metal, and was presented to him by Howard Stark. Steve has also wielded other types of shields on both page and screen, but the most notable has become an iconic symbol. On top of all of this, he's mentally strong enough to be able to wear Nova's helmet, and worthy enough to lift Mjolnir in both the comics and movies. Because of all this skill that Steve possesses, in both the MCU and comics, his powers are classified at a level 8. Steve's vehicle of choice is a motorbike, but I would recommend a helmet. Always wear a helmet, and not just that helmet. Although to be fair, a fall off a bike for him wouldn't provide the same damage as it would to everyone else. But still, it's a bad look. He should be setting an example to younglings. As for the costumes, this is the most common design, translated well to screen. The Winter Soldier look is inspired by what he was seen wearing in Secret Avengers, and he's also had different looks when going by code names including, but not limited to, Nomad and Capwolf. And an old man version of Steve is something that also happens in the comics, when his Super Soldier Serum was neutralized by the Iron Nail, causing Rogers to rapidly age to what his birth date would reflect. But like most things in the comics, this wasn't permanent, eventually gaining his youth back. As for the MCU, his elderly age came when he just decided to go back in time and live a life with Peggy after doing so much heroing.
You want to tell me about her?
No.
As for the comic to screen adaptations of stories that Steve Rogers has been a part of, I've already spoken about his origin, but as for the others, Captain America the Winter Soldier is based on the Winter Soldier comic arc, where Bucky Barnes returns as the brainwashed Winter Soldier. Captain America Civil War takes a lot from the Civil War comic arc, but the books obviously have way more characters involved. Rogers also died in the aftermath of this comic arc, being shot by a brainwashed Sharon Carter after orders from Crossbones, but this was later revealed that it was just his conscience lost in time from the Red Skull's doing. As for the Avengers movies, the first film is loosely based on both Avengers issue 1 and the Ultimates, though Steve was only a part of the latter. Avengers Age of Ultron is loosely based on Avengers issue 54 to 57, comics where Ultron is created by Hank Pym. The movie also takes the title from the Avengers Age of Ultron event, but the story is completely different. Infinity War and Endgame are inspired by the Infinity Saga event in the comics, however, Steve is one of the characters who is dusted away in the books, unlike the movie. He was mentioned to be dead in the MCU in the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Some other notable comic arcs Rogers has been a part of include, but not limited to, Secret Invasion, where the Skrulls infiltrate Earth, Avengers vs. X-Men, where the Avengers versus the X-Men, Spider Island, where all of Manhattan gets Spider-Man's abilities, Fear itself, where the Serpent proclaims 7 superpowered beings as the worthy to spread chaos and fear across Earth, forcing the heroes to fight back as Asgardians retreat, leaving Earth to fend for itself, and Secret Empire, where Steve Rogers is Hydra, but that's not actually Steve Rogers. It's a different version created from the Cosmic Cube. Basically, if there was a major event in the comics, you better believe Steve Rogers was a part of it.
Hail Hydra.
Hey, you want to hear some fun facts about Steve Rogers as Captain America?
Yes, sir. I do.
Here's some fun facts about Steve Rogers as Captain America. Captain America was initially going to be named Super American, but they decided to change it, believing there were too many comic characters with super in their name. The Marvel comic universe runs on a sliding timescale, meaning events are updated to remain more modern. However, because Steve was frozen on ice, they can continue to say that he fought in World War II and just extend his duration frozen on ice, which was initially 20 years. According to the comics, Steve's favourite food is an American cheese sandwich on whole wheat with a glass of milk, and when he's not drinking milk, his preferred tea is Earl Grey. Clearly someone who grew up in the 1920s. And it would be likely that he enjoys these food and beverages while watching his favourite romance comedy, You've Got Mail. And speaking of him being old, this might not come as a shock to too many people, seeing as though Steve is over 100, but he's not a fan of tattoos. Captain America's first comic is actually seen in the first Captain America movie, not the actual book. I doubt there are many copies left, and there's no way they'd be in mint condition. The notebook that Steve writes things in to catch up on in Captain America the Winter Soldier is changed for different regions around the world to align more with their culture. For example, in Australia and New Zealand, we got Steve Irwin and Tim Tams. Before Chris Evans was cast as Steve Rogers, John Krasinski, Sebastian Stan, Chris Pratt, Alexander Skarsgård, Wyatt Russell, the very Marvel named Chase Crawford, Scott Eastwood, Wilson Bethel, Garrett Hedlund, and Kellen Lutz were all considered for the role.
I don't know if I can do this.
Steve Rogers as Captain America is one of Marvel's most noteworthy characters, and not just because he's been around significantly longer than most. Even though we've seen the character be put to screen many times, he's had significantly more stories told in the comics, and I've just spoken about his main 616 appearance. There are all sorts of variants of this character across the multiverse. While there are some major differences from page to screen, and things one medium has covered and the other hasn't, there are also many similarities. Despite this, I think Chris Evans' portrayal does a great job to capture the essence and complexities of the character. Like most Marvel characters who have appeared in many comics, they've had time to evolve and change, so the movies use this to their advantage and create a version that best reflects this in the modern day. As already mentioned, the next video will be about Sam Wilson's Captain America, so make sure you're subscribed to see that when it's released. Now here's Steve Rogers doing it all day.
Just don't know when to give up, do you?
I can do this all day.
Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favourite movie featuring Steve Rogers is. And don't forget to absolutely obliterate those like, subscribe and share buttons. I'm just kidding. Only do it with enough force that it registers. I don't want any of you breaking whatever device you're watching this on.